The term torture means any act by which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, is intentionally inflicted on a person for such purposes as obtaining from him or a third person information or a confession. Police torture in Chicago came to public light around the case of Andrew Wilson. Doctors at Cook County Jail sent a letter to then State's Attorney Richard M. Daley, later mayor, reporting that Wilson had suffered very serious injuries at the hands of police who had interrogated him regarding the murder of 2 Chicago police officers, murders to which he confessed. Daley ignored the letter and later said he never saw it. But it opened the door to broad protests and the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate the situation. The resulting report from the special prosecutor, delivered a few days after the statute of limitations on torture closed, documented many cases of torture by Chicago Police Department Commander John Burge and detectives working under him.
The statute of limitations expired on that charge. So John Burge literally escaped the true penalty that he deserved. However, it opened the door for John Burge to be charged and tried and later convicted for perjury and obstruction of justice.
Sometimes when you apply for this, you wait maybe 2 or 3 years for this. Then you wait another 4 or 5 years to finally get your case heard. So it takes so long in order for you to get released. This is about a lot of torture victims that were going on then, and it's going on now. So how could you say we're going to have a reparations, but it's only going to be because of John Burge?
This is a society that is horrifying to individuals that have spent long terms behind prison walls. There's no meaningful counseling. There's no meaningful opportunities for employment. In other words, what I found out in my release is that the conditions in this society is worse than inside of the prisons. Hello, my name is Mark Clements, and I am a Chicago police torture survivor.
I'm here in regards to my son, Jerome Weathers.
My name is James Gibson. I'm a torture survivor.
My name is Bertha Escamilla.
My name is Nick Escamilla. I am a torture survivor.
His name is Antonio Orlando Porter.
He was a very good baseball player. He loved to bowl, skinny and short and very lovable.
Anything he could help out with. Digging my mama garden. My brother made them dig that garden every year. Every last one of them. And they would try to run somewhere and hide out at family members' houses. He'd drive over there and get them and bring them to that garden.
Pretty much like hang around the house, hang out with his friends, you know.
A young man who was also involved in the gang was shot and killed. There must have been like 12, 14 witnesses, and the only ones that became available 3 young men who were also involved in a different gang. They had the wrong description.
They barged their way in my house with no search warrant, no arrest warrant. Never informed me of why they were there.
They saw him walking and they was like, yeah, grab that one too.
Great. I told him to go get me a bottle of wine.
Yes.
So he never did come back. So I went to pick up his daughter. At the time, she was 6 years old. And I seen the police's, over by her school. And I went that way just to see what was going on. And it was one of them was my son.
And I went to every police station in the area to see where was my son. It was like 3 days later that I finally heard from this detective, Dietrich. He informed me that my son was under arrest for murder.
I was arrested. I was denied my parents. I was denied a youth officer. And I was basically at the mercy of members of the Chicago Police Department. I was placed inside of a small interrogation room with a police officer that identified himself as John McCann. He began to question me about an arson fire in which 4 people had died. I knew nothing about the fire.
When I told them I had no knowledge or nothing about who did it or anything like that, that's when they began to be more aggressive. I was hit in the head, the body, kicked, threatened, and even spit on by these detectives. I repeatedly asked to have an attorney present or make a phone call, and they refused.
That if he didn't cooperate with the police, that they would lock up his wife and that they would take away his 2-year-old girl and put her in DCFS.
They kept him down there 3 days. So I went down and they told me that it was nothing I could do because he was a grown man. So they said, your son...
They didn't let you see him? They didn't let you talk to him?
No.
Nothing for 3 days? You didn't have any contact with him?
No, they wouldn't let me. When he got to 26 in California, he called me like kind of crying. He said, charging me with murder, get me a lawyer.
They beat me. They abused me. They held me for 98 hours. I didn't even know what the word torture meant at that time. All I knew is that they beat me.
Basically called a nigger boy and punched in my chest, being beat across my leg, grabbed my genitals and testicle area and began to squeeze.
They took his clothes in the dead of winter. And he said, Mom, they chained me to the floor in a paper gown and let me sit here for hours and hours with no clothes on. Just socks and my underwear in a paper gown. They chained me to the floor, Ma. It was a bench in there. I was like, why would they chain you to the floor? Ma, they was trying to get me to confess some stuff I didn't do.
For 3 days?
For 3 whole days. Finally, the day after the police officer called me, he called me back and said my son was being booked for murder with intent to kill.
We've seen a lot of discrepancies. And we would go and tell our lawyer this, and our lawyer says, okay, well, that's fine. Just, leave it there and I'll take care of it. He never did any of that.
My attorney, I believe, never did adequate job to defend me. I believe he just threw me to the wolves and let them finish eating me up from when they first had me.
She did her own DNA. She brought in a professional, and that DNA excluded him from whatever fingerprints they found.
I was represented by 2 Cook County public defenders. The failure of these young attorneys were to get up and to adequately investigate the crime, therefore missing witnesses that could have testified to the fact that I did not commit this crime.
Our lawyer says that nobody would believe that these fine bystanding officers could do such a thing. Well, I said they did.
It was traumatizing to be found guilty by 11 whites and 1 African American believing that I committed this crime.
When he told me that my son was being convicted of murder, I felt like they really killed my son that day. He died. That's how I really felt in my heart. Y'all done killed my son up in here. Because he was a good man. He was a helpful man. And he just wasn't no type of way hurt nobody or say a hurtful thing. If it had been a little white guy, he would have been treated a little better than that. He would have been given a blanket, a pillow, or whatever he needed till his parents came there to see that he was treated right. My son's skin color was his only downfall.
You go through that and seem like it's just done to black and brown people.
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely.
And a lot of these polices out here, they crooked.
Yes.
And they put charges on a lot of these guys.
It was so hard. Holidays, birthdays. I didn't know if I was coming or going. I don't know how I made it. My husband was sick. I was going through that. My mother was sick. She had dementia.
Then I developed breast cancer. Time that he should have been spending with his daughter, watching her grow up. She graduated from high school. He didn't get to see that. Then she had her first baby. He wasn't there to, see that.
It was hard being in prison, watching your children grow up without you. I winded up getting divorced while I was in prison. My dad winded up dying while I was in prison, and I couldn't go to the funeral or wake.
Well, the kids were always happy, on their way there. Now, coming home was a different story. Coming home, they would be crying and crying. It's hard to talk to them and telling them, well, he's punished for a crime he didn't do. And they say, well, what is that? What does that mean?
I was so stressed at that time that it brought about the cancer. And right behind that, my mom got that Alzheimer's and dementia. And then I had to deal with my son going to court and being tried and finna be convicted and all of that. I don't even think I dressed up every now and again. I dropped out of church. I just got so depressed. I was mourning a son that was alive who was accused of taking someone else's son, and I couldn't believe that. It's not my reality that my son ever had that kind of malice in his mind, yet alone in his actions.
When you did this with someone that's going through the same thing that you're going through, we were able to talk. We were able to do, all kinds of things, and we helped one another, had them try to understand that it's a long ways to go, that this is not something that's going to close down in a year or 2 years. It's not like that. I says, you have a long ways to go.
It felt like you're not alone no more. You know somebody that's going through your same pain that you never would imagine or want anyone to go through.
I first learned that other men, were victims of police torture just like me. I learned that from behind prison walls. And I began to learn that when I spoke with a brother by the name of Alfonso Travis and another one by the name of Gregory Smith. Both of them described what took place with me inside of the police station.
I didn't find out till way later, after I was already in prison, that these officers had a pattern of torture and abuse. They wanted to close the case no matter what.
My son's been home since 2006, I think, and I'm still doing this. My son has not received justice.
Is that what keeps you going? Is that what motivates you to keep going? That your son has not achieved justice yet?
Yes. He has not received justice, and at the same time, there's many, many more that have not received justice.
I'm involved with CFIS, Chicago Alliance, and the Justice Torture.
Chicago, Justice Torture Center.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I stay hopeful because with them, they work so strongly and diligent to try to free these guys, to get them freed, and all the work that they do, to help.
Yeah.
Like with Gerald Reed.
Yes.
Sitting in prison.
Yes.
All that time.
A dramatic case that illustrates how inadequate the current system is the case of Gerald Reed.
Gerald Reed has spent 30 years behind a prison wall.
I'm in a wheelchair, my belly can't move that much. I'm isolated in a room in a cell in our 6-state deal.
Reed was tortured by police so severely that they broke a metal rod that had been surgically implanted in his thigh to correct an earlier broken femur. After many hours of beating, Reed confessed to 2 murders. He filed a claim with the Turk, which found it to be credible after 3 years. 6 years later, Circuit Court Judge Thomas Gaynor ruled that Reed had indeed been tortured.
Judge Gaynor rendered his decision. He overturned the conviction against Gerald Reed. The conviction was a written statement that they tortured Gerald Reed into signing. And that's the only evidence that they had. Judge Henley, he returned that conviction and told Gerald he had to spend the rest of his time, which was natural life, in prison.
I was granted a new trial by a previous judge, so we don't have no authority in the next judge to do this here.
A demonstration outside Chief Judge Timothy Evans' office in the Loop called for the reversal of this order by Judge Hinelli.
We just want to say this in concluding, that this judge stepped outside the boundaries of the law. Right. What he did is unheard of.
He does not have the power to overturn a decision by a co-equal judge. That's not how the law works.
If you say he did it, prove it. And it was never proven that Gerald Reed did this.
Freeing Gerald Reed from this 29-year ongoing torture and false imprisonment will establish an important example and precedent for the governor to follow in the hundreds of other cases of wrongful conviction and imprisonment through police torture.
Why are we saying free them all? Still this day, we have over 100 Black and Latino people that are still stuck inside of prisons, that are denied each and every day. As people live comfortable in this society, they are denied a hearing on their claim of torture.
These police officers have never been indicted. They have never been punished, given any suspension of any kind. I mean, there's something wrong with that.
I really wished that CPAC had been in action.
We have a campaign going on called CPAC, which is a campaign to get an already elected all-civilian Police Accountability Council. Right. We started out with 150 people in this campaign in 2012, right after Rekia Boyd was shot in the head. Okay. Today, we have 50,000 supporters in this campaign. To not just get police officers prosecuted, we want that, not to just get them held, criminally accountable. We want that. But we also want to have a voice, a control
in who polices our communities and how our communities police, because it's a systemic problem.
If you could speak to someone directly in power, what would you urge them to do?
I would ask them to actually look into how the system helped each other cover up corruption. Everybody deserves their own rights. And if he's entitled to a new trial, release, bail, you give it to him. It's not upon a judge to say, I'll take within my own powers and do whatever he pleases. He has to follow the law.
If you didn't do the crime, why are you sitting in prison doing all this time? And no one is looking at your case. And these guys, they looking for hope. They want to be free.
We demand that the system be fair and acknowledge that maybe that what they said was what really happened.
For lawmakers to enact penalties to impose against the most vulnerable individuals and say that they would die behind a prison wall as a young child, regardless if they're innocent or guilty, is barbaric.
You just lock people up and throw away the key, and then you disappear with paperwork like people will never find it again. When justice prevails, it shows injustice is trying to hide.
One of the other parts of the carceral systems are the ways in which girls and African American women are also part of the system. For example, I was reading something yesterday that talks about black girls' suspension in school, for example. And when they're fighting against sexual abuse or sexual harm, then they're penalized in many ways. So certainly as an African American man, I'm sensitive to the carceral systems, but I'm also equally trying to be more sensitive about what's happening to black girls and black women.
We should recognize that looking at the situation of women, black women and girls, other issues get raised that allow us to understand the work of the carceral system more deeply. And we can also talk about the importance of looking at the experiences of trans people, and especially trans women. And so then we began to think about the prison system, the apparatuses of oppression, the police violence and prison violence as being linked in some kind of continuum to intimate violence, so that we would have to talk about those forms of violence together. And these are issues that would not have necessarily come up if we had only focused on the predicament of men in prison.
I would urge people to vote. I would urge people to pay attention to the election and the politicians that they put in place, the judges, the state's attorneys they're electing. You know what I'm saying? I would ask people to look into what those issues are that these people are running on the platform that they're presenting.
I hope that these laws will change. And I hope that all these people who are innocent get justice.
Natural life sentencing of youth as a tool to silence them, and to see that some of these men, that the system literally said that they would never come home. They're home.
Wrongful convictions are a violation of the U.S. Constitution and the most basic human rights. The governor of Illinois, and only the governor, has the power to right this crime and free these men and women by granting them pardons.
I would say to Governor Pritzker to free all torture victims.
As I say, free Gerald Reed, we must continue to fight. As I say, free Antonio Porter, we must continue to fight. As I say, free them all, that represents us all standing up and doing our duty to expose the systemic racist cops